Hello, and welcome to Angry at the Right Things podcast with Bronwyn
Katie.
and we are doing a video. It's been a while. We're kind of out of sorts. We did audio only for a while, but we need to do video because sometimes people need to see a real face. I know I do. So, welcome to Angry at the Right Things. And if you're listening in audio, welcome audio listeners as well. Please remember, if you love what you hear, please share it with someone. Please subscribe to my podcast and please leave a 5-star review so other people can know it's worth listening to. So, we are going to talk about body literacy today.
Body literacy.
We've talked about gut literacy.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about body literacy because as a therapist, I am always learning more and more about how our bodies work and how they are always speaking to us.
Right.
But we don't listen. We're not good listeners. So body literacy is how to listen, how to become literate in what our bodies are trying to communicate.
Okay. I'm excited to
You seem really excited.
hear what you have to say about this.
So in the past, when I was in my first career, which was as a nutritionist, I never would have believed these things.
Yeah.
I would have thought that's so woo-woo.
Yeah.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I see it kind of every day in my
Yeah.
practice, and I've experienced it firsthand. And it just makes so much sense that I think fact is truly stranger than fiction. So I want to just kind of share my update with where I'm at with what I'm learning so far so we can help everyone else kind of be more fluent in reading their bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like be tuned in.
Tune in because it's attunement. We're talking about attunement. So tuning into our bodies. That's exactly, yes. So let's start with the bowel. That's a fun organ or group of organs, actually.
Yeah.
The bowel. So one repeated theme for me that I am learning is just how much our bowel corresponds to disassociated feelings of disgust and shame. Because if you've listened to previous podcasts, I see shame as a form of self-disgust. So we can either feel disgusted with ourselves, which we call shame, or disgust with someone else. And we disassociate from those feelings oftentimes. And our bowel will speak to us. And now it's to the point that I see this so often, and I myself have experienced it as well, where I believe that if someone is having like undiagnosed or kind of debilitating gut issues over time, that they are usually living with someone who is making them disgusted and they're disassociating. They don't want to acknowledge it.
Right. Right. So do you mean like when someone has sort of like chronic gut issues that can't really be explained by some other reason,
which is
many, right?
Which is almost all, actually. It's almost all gut issues. People are hospitalized, and what does the doctor always say? We ran every test. We have no idea. We can find no rationale, but we'll run some more tests because we can make good money off of all these tests. We'll do a colonoscopy. We'll do an endoscopy. We'll do whatever, MRI, whatever. I don't know what they do, but they do a lot of tests, but they find no reason. But there is a reason, and it's usually disgust or shame, which is another form of disgust.
Right.
So I have actually gotten to the place now where if I hear of, for example, a woman who has a lot of debilitating gut issues, I think, what is her partner like with her behind closed doors? I mean, I really have that suspicion these days.
Yeah.
I really do, because I've seen enough of it that you just can't shake that suspicion.
Yeah. That rings true for me too. Like just anecdotally with some people that I know. Yeah.
Okay. So it resonates.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So again, we can have chronic diarrhea, we can have ulcers, we can have nausea, we can have diverticulitis, diverticulosis, we could have Crohn's, we could have IBS, IBD, we can have all these different names, labels that the medical industry will give us, but none of them tell us why our gut is spazzing and not working. And so if that is you or someone you know, I want you to start considering, like, what disgusts me? Is it me? Or is it someone I'm around? And maybe I should stop disassociating from that and address it head on. And we'll get to more of how to address it at the end of this little clip.
Okay.
Yeah. And as long as we're talking about bowel, let's talk just a little bit about the gallbladder. What does the gallbladder store? Do you know offhand?
Is it bile?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
What emotion do you think might be represented by bile?
Bile. The first thing that comes to mind is grief for some reason.
Oh, grief.
But
okay.
I don't know. Anger?
Yeah, I think hatred.
Hatred. There you go.
I associate
Okay.
the gallbladder when people have gallbladder issues, like stones, or they have to have it removed. I believe there's hatred. I believe bile equals like vile. The word vile, I think, evolved from the word bile, or one of them stemmed from the other.
Okay.
I think that's hatred. And I think that could be someone who has a lot of self-hatred, or it could be someone who's just storing up a lot of hatred in their gallbladder. Again, like even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have like engaged in this at all. But I just see it so often. Do I think diet plays a part? Yes, absolutely. But if we do hate ourselves, our diet is going to play a big part. We're not going to be eating a healthy diet.
Right.
Or if we have hatred that we're disassociating from, no matter what our diet is, it's going to affect us. So that's kind of where I stand right now. Let's talk about our uterus, which is part of our gut, actually.
Right.
Let's talk about our uterus. So I see a lot of reproductive disorders such as infertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS, erratic period menstrual cycles, and PMS that are actually linked to experiencing or not experiencing nurture from the mother.
Okay.
And our uterus is associated with nurture, with the word compassion. Like in the Hebrew, compassion is the same root letters as the word womb in the Hebrew. And so I believe when women are not experiencing the compassion or the nurture from their own mothers, it takes a huge effect on our own reproductive system. And I believe it can cause really bad PMS and even PCOS and other reproductive issues.
Wow.
Yeah. So I want to share a little bit more about that. Also, I do have women clients, female clients, who, when they talk about the lack of nurture they've received from their mothers, they feel, while they're talking, they can feel an emptiness in their uterus, which is lower than our stomach. And they'll feel it, like they'll say, like, I'll say, where do you feel that emptiness that you're describing? They'll say, well, like my lower stomach. And I'll say, oh, like your uterus? And some will go, yeah, actually it is my uterus. So that emptiness there is really, can be very poignant.
Right.
And a lot of those female clients, and I've experienced this too, when they're especially haunted by that emptiness, like when they're going through something very painful, where they need that nurture, that compassion from a mother, and they don't get it, that's when they overeat the most. They're like trying to fill up that emptiness. And I've done that myself.
Yeah.
You know. And when I lead these clients in integration exercises with their inner child, where they become that attachment figure for themselves, they will feel that emptiness vanish during that exercise. And they'll oftentimes feel like a warmth and a fullness.
Wow.
In their gut or in their like uterus specifically. Healing. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. So I did get my one client's permission to share her story about this. So she, I'll call her Jenny. She stopped having her period when she was 15. She probably only had a period for about, 3 or 4 years at that point, but it stopped. And it was, I think, just erratic. She was diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And she even had a difficult time getting pregnant when she was married years later because of the enduring PCOS. And when she started learning, about how our bodies speak to us, how they try to communicate, she actually told me one day in session, she said, Bronwyn, I actually have a really good theory for why my period stopped at age 15. She said, when I was 15, that's when my mother demanded that I basically parent my younger siblings more than ever. And it was also when she was 15. So she had this whole life that she wanted to live and be social and be involved in extracurricular activities. And that's when mom just put the kibosh on all that. Nope, you're going to raise your siblings. And so she said, I started seeing it as my body saying to me, you are not allowed to potentially nurture another person. You are not allowed to bring a little person into this world because you are too busy nurturing your own siblings. So I'm going to withhold that ability from you.
Right.
And it just made so much sense when she shared that with me.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I have another client who was sharing how she moved like every year for many years of her life, almost every year of her life, since she was a young teenager. And you know what got her through were her plants. And she found her plants to be like kind of the one consistent source of nurture for her. And also she gave them nurture. So she nurtured the plants and the plants were like a source of nurture back to her. And while we were talking in session, she was sharing how upset she was because she had just moved again and her plants, she thought died in the move because it was very, very hot that day. And while she was sharing that and she was crying, she felt her uterus cramping up. And it wasn't time for her to have her period.
Right.
So again, I think we don't need a whole lot of evidence. I think it's very intuitive to say that our uterus does very much respond to nurture or lack of nurture. Right?
Yeah.
And then myself, I had horrible PMS. Basically my whole life until I had my daughter. I actually had it so bad that I couldn't move. Like if I got cramps, even if I took medication like ibuprofen or something, I would just be have to lie down for like hours. In fact, one time I was in Mexico City on a tour with the organization I was working with, and we were at this awesome museum. I think it was like the History Museum in Mexico City. And I was so excited to go in and see it. And the minute we got there, my cramps started and I just lied on my back on like a bench outside the entire 3 hours. And I missed the whole thing because I was debilitated. I couldn't do a thing. So it was really bad. And then when I had my daughter, all of a sudden, no more cramps, like zero, nothing. And I believe that's because I found my daughter, Edie, such a source of nurture. Like I found that nurturing her nurtured me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's crazy is what it is. But yes, that's a good story. Let's talk about back pain because the back, I believe, is where we especially are dissociating. We feel it in our back. So our neck, when someone feels pain in their neck, I say, what are you resisting right now? Because that's where I think we feel we're resisting feeling something that we know to be true.
Yeah.
If it shows up in like a lower back, like lower back pain, I believe that's where we disassociate from our disgust in our gut or our shame in our gut. So it just corresponds to the other side of the body. And then if it's upper back, I think that's anger, which usually we feel in our chest. And so we're dissociating from the chest, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the uterus and nurture, what about, do you feel like there's any corresponding body response for men in regards to a lack of nurture? like you don't have uteruses, obviously.
Right.
So have you ever noticed any, like, how does the lack of nurture show itself for men?
I don't have nearly as
Oh,
many male clients as
right.
female, but I can think of one male client who shared how he felt an emptiness in his gut.
Okay, just in the gut,
Yeah.
in general.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I think with men, it's more just gut.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Good
Sorry to
question.
interrupt you.
No, that was a
Okay.
really good question.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we're feeling back pain, what I'll do is have that person say, let's say it's the lower back. I'll say, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to speak to your body and say, it's okay to feel disgust right now. And usually like the pain in their back stops and they'll start feeling like a pit in their stomach.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's shame. So I'll say, okay, I want you just to say, it's okay to feel shame. It's okay to be vulnerable if you feel shame right now. And then they'll feel that in their gut. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So the head, we all disassociate into our head. And this happens with every one of my clients in almost every session. And so when I say to them, what are you feeling in your body? They'll say, I'm not really feeling anything. I'm just kind of feeling tired. That's our dissociation at work. When we're feeling tired, we're dissociating.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll say, okay, I want you to pause. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to speak to your brain. And I want you to say, Bronwyn's brain, I so appreciate you. You are so smart. But I need you to go offline right now. I need you to take a break. And I need to feel whatever I'm feeling just in my body. No thinking. And then they'll start to feel it in their body. So we got to put the brain on hold. We're going to come back to the brain, but first we feel before we can strategize, right? We have to tune in.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to listen to our bodies. And once we start to feel the feelings, once we start to recognize, then we do the integration exercise. So what I would do really simply is I would say, okay, so for example, recently I had some back pain. I will feel lower back pain oftentimes when I'm listening to my clients talk about their parents, about people in their lives who are disgusting. And I'm realizing, oh, that's my dissociation from disgust at these people. So what I'll do is I'll close my eyes and I'll say, okay, it's little Bronwyn. It is okay to feel hatred towards these people. It's okay to feel disgust towards them. That is an okay feeling to have. And I don't blame you for feeling it. So I start there. And then I'll say, I know that person reminds you a lot of your mother and father, little Bronwyn, who treated us in a very similar way. And there's a lot of echoes here. And I'm so sorry I didn't do a better job protecting you. Little Bronwyn, I didn't. I'm so sorry that I neglected and abandoned you all those years. And I failed to attune to your pain. Please forgive me. I am going to win back your trust and I am going to be a faithful and trustworthy attachment figure for you now. And I'm not going to allow this person to hurt you ever again. I'm going to protect you because your feelings matter to me. And I am all ears. So you can relax as you learn to trust me. And as I do that, that back pain goes away. The gut disgust goes away. So that's like a basic integration exercise
that you do for yourself.
That I do for myself and I do for my clients. And I want everyone listening to feel free to copy this and do it for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that is an update on that. And now I'm going to share kind of my own, what I would like to call the valley of the shadow of death in my own life. And I'm not sharing this because I think that my experience is specifically more unique or more salient than anyone else's. I think everyone has a journey through the valley of the shadow of death that they have experienced. But I do want to share how I've looked back now on that journey and been able to connect the dots and see why it was the valley of the shadow of death for me, how I contributed to that myself. Because things don't just happen to us passively. We have to allow them to happen to us. So I want to own what I did. And I'm doing that so all who are listening, all who are watching can learn.
Yeah.
And learn how to undo it as well. So this is this segment. It's called The Journey Through the Valley of the Shadow of Death, or alternate title, A Perfect Recipe for a Major Depressive Episode.
Oh.
Because it was that too.
Yeah.
And the subtitle of that would be Shame and Betray Thyself. That's the recipe, folks. Shame thyself and betray thyself. That's a perfect recipe for a major depressive episode. So I've talked about this before. My first major depression was induced from suppressed anger at a betrayal at my husband, who did not empathize with me. And it was a very extreme depressive episode because I got very physically sick. But it probably lasted maybe like 9 months, if that. It was pretty acute. And I was able to pull myself out of it with my life choices, which at the time was the decision to go back to school to get another master's to become a therapist. And that made me feel like I mattered. And that kind of pulled me out of that first depressive episode. This is my second major depressive episode that I'm going to talk about today. And it was much more complex. It was much more pernicious and enduring. And it was induced less by suppressed anger and more by shame. And shame, man, shame will kill us. It will debilitate.
Yeah.
I mean, it will make us like the Walking Dead. And I was very much the Walking Dead. Shame both imprisons us within ourselves and exiles us from our core self, because we believe that we are inherently wrong or defective. We agree with that shame, and thus we are believing a lie, living in darkness. When we absorb shame and believe that we are shameful, we are betraying ourselves because we're believing a lie.
Yeah.
So I was just starting out as a marriage and family therapy, not even intern. When interns first get going, they're actually called a trainee for the first, I don't even remember, 100 hours or something. You're a trainee. You're not even an intern yet. And I was starting out at a counseling center. My supervisor, Dave, was also the clinic director, which is a conflict of interest that I didn't appreciate at the time. Apparently, Dave didn't appreciate it either at the time. We'll get to that. And he was the ultimate authority figure for me because I was projecting all my daddy issues onto him, desperate to win his approval. Just like my actual dad, Dave didn't display much approval of me. So I thought it was a match made in heaven, because that made me work harder to win it. So Dave told me my first client ever, and I've shared this before, was going to be a couple. Now, anyone who is a therapist is probably like gasping out loud right now, because you never give someone a couple unless they're properly trained, because a couple is a different beast than an individual.
Yeah.
And this was going to be my first client ever. I was not trained. I was not ready. I mean, there's a lot of licensed therapists who don't see couples. So that was what he told me. And I said to Dave, I can't see a couple. I'm not ready to do that. And he said, you're going to be fine. You're going to see the couple. And if I had been not betraying myself, if I had not been so desperate to win Daddy Dave's approval, I would have said, "Oh, wow, Dave, this seems like a bad fit. Maybe I shouldn't be here at your counseling center. I'm going to find another venue to be
Yeah.
a trainee and an intern at." But I was so enmeshed with Dave because I needed his approval that I betrayed myself. And I said, "Okay, I'll see the couple."
Mm.
And I saw the couple. Now, let's back up. Um, I believe the reason he did something so unethical like he did is because he wasn't just my supervisor, he was the clinic director. And this particular couple they were not willing to pay a higher fee to see a seasoned licensed therapist. They were only willing
Mm.
to pay the lowest fee, which was a trainee fee. And I
Mm.
was the only trainee that had room to take them in. So I think as clinical director, he wanted to up the numbers. He didn't want to turn away potential patrons.
Mm.
And that's where I think that conflict of interest played right into that. Um, so I should have not betrayed myself. So I'm not just blaming Dave here. I was like 40 years old, 42, 43. I don't know. I was in my early 40s. I should have been a grown up and said no. I didn't. So I betrayed myself. And this was the beginning of that depressive episode. So I was suppressing my anger and not channeling it out into healthy boundaries and assertiveness with Dave. The couple, by the way, was so conflictual and dysfunctional, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I was also enmeshed with the couple because I was just starting out and I felt responsible for the success of their marriage. I really
Mm.
did. And every time I met with them, I got more and more depressed because I felt like I was failing them. So that was on me. I can't blame Dave for that. That was on me. I was enmeshed. I didn't have a good boundary with them.
Mm.
But when I met with him for supervision, I didn't feel like I could be honest with how much I was struggling. I didn't feel like he would support me or validate that. So I didn't get the supervision I needed to. So it kind of became this vicious
Uh.
cycle. I felt like I was drowning. And so I reached out to a really good friend
Mm.
called Liz. She was a licensed psychologist and a good friend of mine.
Mm.
And I told her how much I was struggling. She kind of played alternate supervisor to me on the side. And she said,
Mm.
"Oh my God, I hear how much this is affecting you. I hear how dysfunctional they are. You're not trained. This is crazy." And she's like, "I think you should terminate with them immediately." So I did. That's not good practice. So I did. I get in trouble with Dave. Now I get Dave's major disapproval. I sink further into the depressive episode because now I'm ashamed. Now I'm absorbing shame from Dave because he's disapproving of me. So that added to that cycle even more. But in truth, looking back, that shame was his for giving me that couple
Yeah.
and putting numbers above
Yeah.
ethics as a
He
supervisor.
set you up for failure.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you listen to the past few episodes, you can recall that when I'm uncomfortable around people who like aren't making a lot of eye contact, they're really quiet, I can get really obnoxious because I get triggered.
Mm.
I feel like I'm in the house I grew up in and
Mm.
it feels like I'm being rejected.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened at this counseling center. The other counselors, they weren't unfriendly, but there wasn't like a lot of friendliness. There wasn't a lot of eye contact. Everyone's kind of like ships in the night, especially me as a newcomer. So it was very quiet. Dave was there. I felt like he was my disapproving father. So it felt like exactly like the home I grew up in. Another match made in heaven to trigger me. So I wasn't quite myself. I was more obnoxious. I was like more opinionated. I was more talkative. I wasn't my best Bronwyn self. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
myself actually. Um, I knew that I wasn't myself. I didn't know why I wasn't myself. I knew it had something to do with how uncomfortable I felt. So one day, Dave told me that we're going to skip supervision and instead we're going to go into something called group process. And that would count for my supervision that week.
Mm.
And I didn't know what that was. And it is basically where the therapist at that particular clinic met I think they met once a month to process their own experiences of their clients, of their lives, of themselves, and each other. And what that entails, part of what it entails, is they mirror each other by reflecting back what they see and hear of that person. Now, if I had known that piece was there, I would have said, oh, yeah, I don't do that. I can't do that because I had my own shame issues. So I don't do mirroring. I don't want to be in a group where someone mirrors back me to me. Like that would be too triggering. But I wasn't given informed consent about what group process entailed. I was just schlepped to the group process room and told we're going to do that instead of one-on-one supervision. So what's ironic is that as therapists, we're trained to give informed consent about the therapeutic process. And I didn't get informed consent by Dave. So I just go to the group. So I'm sitting with about 9 other therapists. Daddy Dave is one of them, of course, and he's right across from me in the circle. And they start processing their stresses, and some of them cry, but I'm watching the other ones showing a lot of empathy, a lot of attunement, a lot of support, and there's nothing scary. So I'm feeling more safe. I'm letting down my guard. When it comes to my turn, Daddy Dave looks to me and says, Bronwyn, is there anything you want to share? And I think to myself, why not? Famous last words. So I share vulnerably, as many of them already have, and I say how I don't feel like I'm really myself here at this clinic, that I feel like I might come across as like a big personality, I think I said a strong personality because I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable. And what I'm expecting is people to go, oh, I get that. That makes sense. That'd be hard. Yeah. What I got was Daddy Dave, who looks at me and says, I've noticed. I was not expecting that. And he's my Daddy Dave figure. He's my daddy figure. So I am feeling shame. And all of a sudden, my head just goes down. It's hanging like it weighs 40 pounds. And my eyes start pouring out water like some kind of stream. And I can't look up. I cannot make eye contact. I literally am begging the ground to open up and swallow me. I have never felt so much shame in my entire life. And what he said wasn't objectively wrong, but it was my personal worst nightmare. And so
it's like he verified what you were most
ashamed of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You let yourself be vulnerable.
It was, So
horrible.
I'm frozen. Dave asks me to look up and raise my head, and I can't. I shake my head no. I'm silent. Someone gives me a box of tissues because my clothes are wet. Then I hear one therapist say, after some silence, he says, I'm glad Dave said what he did.
What?
Oh, yeah, that's what he said.
Wow.
Yes.
Let's pile on.
That is how I felt.
Oh, my.
I felt like a dog pile. I felt like, kick me when I'm down.
Wow. And this is a group of therapists.
This is a group of therapists.
Wow.
Most of them licensed.
Yeah.
Then I hear another therapist, a female, say, me too. I'm glad Dave said that. And now I'm feeling publicly disgraced for sport.
Yeah.
Is this kind of some sick, sadistic, psychological game? And I just stay silent, my head down. I'm crying. They eventually move on to the next person. There is no closure. Wow. They move on to the next person. And when it ends, I stand up. Dave comes over without saying a thing, and he gives me a hug. And I am thinking, what the actual fuck?
Yeah.
Is that supposed to comfort me? No, this is insane. So when that ends, I go there's a little tiny intern counseling room, the one with no windows, and it's tiny and dark. And I go in there, I lock it, I lie on the sofa, and I cry silently in the fetal position for about an hour. That was probably the worst day of my life, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was so horrible.
Oh.
But I'm too ashamed to tell anyone.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever told me
I've
the
never told you
details of this
this.
story.
No.
I think I knew kind of
Yeah.
that something had happened, but
I was too ashamed to tell anyone.
Yeah.
What if they agreed? What if they Yeah. Shame also makes you keep secrets, right?
Oh yeah.
And then you're stuck in the shame all by yourself, right? Okay. So then I try to go on like everything's normal, like staying at the counseling center,
Oh man.
acting like everything's okay, and betray myself in that process of staying there.
Oh.
And so my depression gets worse. I never confront Dave. I never tell. I could have told one of my professors. I eventually did way after the fact, but not in a timely fashion. I will spare you the details of the horrible things that take place after this, but here's a brief summary, because shame leads to more shame. In response to that shame session, I become passive aggressive with the first person who said, "I'm glad Dave said that." So I'm passive aggressive with him. He outs me to Dave. Dave confronts me individually and tells me that he thinks I'm an unsafe person. The graduate school liaison from my graduate program, her name is Sarah. She sends Dave an angry email having nothing to do with any of this, but it's an angry email because I'm not getting enough clients. And she CCs me on the email. He CCs me on the email responding to her. And he lists everything he doesn't like about me in the response. So I finally leave that counseling center and I go to a new counseling center where I'm friends with the clinic director, Kristen. Yay, go Bronwyn, not betraying herself. Look at her. However, dun, 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 I am given Jonathan, who is a very abusive supervisor there, who ends up getting fired right after he starts supervising me for his abusiveness that has not only included me, but not until he's had the opportunity to inflict shame onto me and make me cry more than once. And one of his abuses, his worst one, included blaming me, a trainee, I'm still a trainee, for the suicide attempt of one of my clients. Yeah, that was my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm God. I'm so powerful. And he said it was because I recommended that she procure a book on DBT skills. And that's the reason she attempted suicide, is that she got the book like I suggested.
Yeah.
And she got so triggered. Which is very ironic for anyone who knows about DBT skills. They were actually made by Marsha Linehan for people with suicidal ideation, which is why I recommended it. But the worst thing wasn't that Jonathan was such a freak of nature. The worst thing was that Kristen, the former friend who was the clinic's director, she ended up supervising me in the inner room after he was fired abruptly. And she told me that she agreed with his assessment that I was to blame for my client's suicide attempt.
Because you recommended a book.
Yeah. A DBT book.
And how could recommending a book cause someone
I don't know.
to attempt suicide?
I don't know that anything makes sense. I think a lot of people are much more sick and sadistic than we would like to acknowledge.
And a lot of them seem to go into therapy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a proportionately higher.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
It does seem like that.
Yeah.
So my depression, as you can imagine, grew worse because I stayed at this counseling center. I tried to make it work, further betraying myself. But I'm getting more and more and more depressed. I'm like losing functionality. And I reach out to Liz, the friend who is a licensed psychologist, for support. Now, she had already gotten in trouble a little bit with being the alternative supervisor who recommended I terminate abruptly at the first center.
Mm-hmm.
So she tells me she wants to have a boundary with me. She doesn't want to talk about this stuff with me. And I didn't respect that boundary. I didn't. I pushed it, and I own that. When I didn't respect her boundary, she ended our friendship of like now several years.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt, any guesses what feeling I felt?
Shame.
Shame.
More shame.
More shame. I entirely blamed myself because I couldn't not talk about this.
Right. You were desperate for help.
I was desperate. And
Yeah.
she actually seemed to have the only common sense of anyone I spoke to.
Right.
Yeah.
She was like the only seemingly safe person
Yeah.
for you to reach out to.
Yes. She made a lot of sense and I trusted her. So she ended the friendship. I felt so alone and so rejected and abandoned when I was so vulnerable. I mean, I was just, oh God. So the combination of the shame I felt from blaming myself entirely for her ending our friendship and the suppressed anger at her for abandoning me when I was so vulnerable just kind of like did me in.
Yeah.
And when I say did me in, I mean my brain stopped working.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember things my whole life. People tell me like, I don't know how you remember things. Like you remember things verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
My brain stopped. My memory stopped.
It's like you clicked into a dissociative state. Like,
yeah. I was like a zombie person.
Mm-hmm.
I kept getting in minor car accidents during this time. Our insurance went way up.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even I never get in minor car accidents. It was so weird. But it was like I was checked out. When I was with my clients that I still had, I couldn't think of anything to say to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing came to mind. And so I was losing all my clients because my brain wasn't working and that created more shame. I basically stopped being a therapist and seeing individual clients. I did get several jobs at like clinics where I didn't have to see individual clients, but I got let go of both of those because my brain wasn't working and I was more ashamed of that. And so I took stupid minimum wage jobs for several years, which also made me feel ashamed because at this point I had 2 master's degrees and I'm making like minimum wage.
Yeah.
So, fun facts though, during those years when my brain wasn't working, I watched a lot of movies and I've been rewatching those movies now because my brain's back on and I'm like, oh my God, this movie's amazing. I didn't even follow it when I watched it originally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So fun fact, you can relive those years. You can reclaim the years you lost. I am doing that now. So I also believe again, I used to be a nutritionist. I believe that during all of that, I developed either vitamin D, iodine, or vitamin B deficiency of one of the B vitamins. And I think that all the stress created that deficiency. But I do know this, that during the years I was at the minimum wage position, I started taking vitamins because my hair wasn't growing and someone said you should take biotin. I got biotin, which is a B vitamin. I got that within like a bunch of other, like a multivitamin. So I started taking iodine, vitamin D, and other vitamins, and my hair started growing. And that is when my brain started coming back on, like almost overnight. Like all of a sudden I can remember things. All of a sudden I felt like my brain's working again. It was nothing short of miraculous.
Wow.
So that was awesome. And the other turning point, the big one, was when I was able to recognize the template for my shame in the first place, which was my father, and how he taught me as a child that I'm responsible for his feelings. And if he's angry, then I'm shameful. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's when I did that first exercise for myself where I imagined little Bronwyn, who's 10 years old, at the dining room table and him shaming me. And I imagined putting all the shame in a cardboard box and giving it back to him and saying, hey, this is yours, not mine. Return to owner. Mm-hmm. And that, between the vitamins and that exercise, it was like I came back to myself and better than myself, like Bronwyn 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can attest to that. I've seen it all.
The before and after. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that exercise, when I reversed the shame from my father, which was the template for my shame, allowed me to see that other people were shameful, not me, and give them back their shame and not just absorb it. Because all this time I'd been absorbing, never questioning that it was my shame, right? And so my shame started to dissipate very quickly after this. I was able to see that Dave was shameful for forcing me to see clients I wasn't ready for, that helped him and harmed me. And by the way, harmed the couple. Forcing me to attend a type of group therapy without giving me informed consent, having no boundaries as both the clinical director and my supervisor, and just being a very clueless person that shouldn't be a therapist if you're that clueless. So I was able just to, in my mind, I haven't done anything with him, but in my mind, giving him back the shame. Mm-hmm. With Kristen, I didn't just give it back to her in my mind. I wrote her a letter and I told her about how she's a bully. And I emailed her that letter and I told her she should have lost her license for telling me I was responsible for the suicide attempt of my client when I was under her supervision. And that felt very cathartic. That gave me a lot of closure. Also, even with Liz was kind of the final frontier for me. And I was able to see the big picture there, that yes, I didn't respect her boundary, but I also started remembering that Liz kind of was an overreactor. She would overreact to kind of everything. And she would pathologize things that weren't really pathological. Like I remember when we were friends, she would see someone's behavior and be like, can you believe it? And she'd make and I'm thinking, you're a psychologist and you're pathologizing something that we all do. Like she would just really overreact to things. And I realized, oh, that's what she did to me. Mm-hmm. She overreacted and she pathologized me. And I was able to unpathologize myself and go, okay, I contributed to this, but she did too. And I was able to see it with that healthy detachment, that healthy objectivity, and not carry that shame anymore. So this process of revisiting my journey and seeing things clearly was one I did for myself. I did not dare to entrust this journey to a therapist because I went to enough therapists at this time to know better. I knew it had to come organically from within me. And I know that I made mistakes along the way, but I no longer believe I'm shameful or that it was all me. And this unraveling of my shame knot is what saved my life. Yeah. It saved my life. And participating in my own deliverance was what gave me wisdom to help my clients now and others. Yeah. And I am learning that the journey to the tree of life is a winding road that requires walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And no one can do it for you, but you're never truly alone. It's the hero's journey, and the treasure you ultimately procure if you persevere is you. Yeah. The version of you were destined to be. Yeah. Humans were made to participate in their own liberation, not wait for someone else to rescue them. I like that. Yeah. So that's my story. This is your first time hearing the entirety of it. So I do want to hear your thoughts and reflections. I have one more thing. Yeah. This makes us strong, wise, and whole. And even though I would never want to relive the time I spent under the shadow, I can honestly thank God for that experience.
Yeah, it's like you have how, even though it seems odd, you have a gratitude for it because it made you who you are now.
Yes.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to relive it and you wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it made you who you are.
It's like the therapeutic saying, the only way out is through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw some quote recently and I wish I could remember exactly what it said, but it was something like, even if, the only person that you save in this life is yourself, it's enough.
Yeah. Well, it's the only person you can save.
Right. I mean, you ultimately, right? It is, right? I mean, we want to help others. We want to do for others, but you're the one you have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. It's amazing to hear that whole story. I didn't know that story. That's devastating. Yeah, I can't. It all makes so much sense to me now. The depth, how you fell into that deep, dark place. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know the full details of it. And it makes complete sense to me now.
It is a deep, dark place, like a grave.
Yeah.
But a grave can be a womb.
Yeah, no, it's like a resurrection.
It's a resurrection, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're such a different, stronger, like you said, like Bronwyn 2.0. You're like this amazing, like improved. I mean, you were great before. I've known you for 20 years. Yeah. And you were amazing before, but now it's like you're this like remade version of yourself.
Yeah.
That now has all this like, what's the word I'm looking for? Shoot, I can't think of it.
Chutzpah?
That's a good one too. But like, just you've found a way to use all this that you've, acquired and turn it out and like reflect it to others.
It's given me wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the wisdom
that you couldn't have gotten any other way.
You don't learn it in school.
No.
It's a learn by doing. Yeah. And it's not fun, but you're the wiser for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. So I want to contrast that with something ironic, and then we're going to wrap it up, I think. You know how people say, have you heard this? People say, my friend Carrie, she's really gone through it. She's really gone through a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll say that. We'll use that phrase. Yeah. They've gone through a lot. I want to distinguish going through it versus staying in it.
Yeah.
Because I just said, like, we participate in our own liberation.
Yeah, like becoming stuck.
Yeah. Because I think we use the phrase, they've gone through a lot. And I'm like, well, have they gone through it or are they still in it? And if they're still in it, they haven't gone through it.
Yeah.
They're just in it. Mm-hmm. And like, let's really distinguish. Mm-hmm. So for example, the church I used to go to, the secretary, she's really sweet. She was telling me about this woman named Natalie. And she's like, yeah, I love Natalie. I'm so glad you've met her. She's so awesome. She's gone through so much. Like, I have so much respect for her because she's really gone through it. So what Natalie went through, that this woman was sharing with me, is her husband. So when she had a baby, her husband felt very abandoned by her, as many husbands do, if not probably all, if we're honest. And he felt so abandoned that he drove under the influence and he killed someone. Mm-hmm. And he went to jail or prison. I don't remember what. And so here she is with a newborn baby and a husband in jail.
Mm.
And so this woman from church was saying, yeah, Nellie's just gone through it. I have so much respect for her. Well, did she go through it, or was she just in it and still is in it? And I would have to say she's still in it, because what did she do? Did she decide to give her husband an ultimatum? Like, if you're feeling abandoned, you need to use your words. You can't just start driving, and you can't be a drunk, and maybe we should split up, or like, she didn't do any of that. She didn't do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing she did do that I'm aware of is she had another child with him a few years later.
Mm.
So this first woman, who I'll call Rachel, is like, has so much respect for Natalie because she went through it. And I'm thinking, no, Natalie did not go through it. She was in it, and she's still in it, but there was no going through. There was no
Right.
participating in her own deliverance, taking ownership of the situation, and like working through it towards resolution. She's actually just enabling it. So
Yeah.
let's not talk about people, they've gone through it, unless they've actually participated in their own liberation from it and are no longer in it. So I just
Yeah.
really want to just show the irony there. And our times of suffering are opportunities for us to wake up and rise up,
Mm-hmm.
so we can move through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Anything you want to say further?
Oh, I was just thinking that it's like you were saying that it's if this person was, when she was saying she's really gone through it, she's really saying she's
Enabling.
yeah, I mean, she's suffered, but she's continued to suffer with her own choices.
Yeah, she's
right?
enabling the suffering.
Yeah.
Right.
So is that really something to be admired?
Mm-mm.
Not to judge, but I don't know that it, I don't know. Yeah, that's
And I'm not saying it's not easy.
no.
I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
easy to move through it. It's hard.
No.
It's hard, way harder
Yes.
initially to wake up and rise up and move through it. It is harder.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it is so much easier and better in the long run. And we need to play the long game.
Yeah.
And not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires sometimes asking for help and not trying to do it alone.
Yeah.
So no, I get Natalie, but I
Mm.
don't want to raise her up as some kind of model.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's not use her as a model.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in, you guys. We're going to talk more next time about learned helplessness. I have a whole bunch to say on that, but thanks for listening, and please share this with a friend if you think it would help them, and subscribe and give me a 5-star review. Thank you so much. Bye.